It's noon. Your team is anxiety scrolling at their desk, barely eating, and this matches the latest data that shows that 38% of employees don't feel encouraged to take lunch. 22% of bosses actually think that people who take breaks are less hardworking. As a result, most folks skip the break, lose focus, creativity, and even their afternoon spark. But here's what we know. A 15-minute mindful walk or a silent break can boost focus, reduce fatigue, and improve results all the way into the evening. In today's episode, we're going to break down how your team's lunch break habits may actually be draining creativity and how intentional lunchtime rituals can help you recharge energy, elevate teamwork, and fuel real innovation. Want to do this? Let's go. Hi, y'all. I'm Danielle McGEOUGH. I am a professor, a mom, and a planner and ritual nerd, and I'm so excited to talk with you all about lunch breaks, but this is something that I struggle mightily with. When I get in the zone, I want to keep going and keep going and keep going until I absolutely flatten out. But the issue is that I notice that when I do this, I also flatten out a lot earlier in the afternoon than if I intentionally and strategically take my lunch break. Now, I have to say, I work in higher ed, and there is not much of a lunch break culture at all in higher ed. One, all of us kind of are on our unique schedules, at least professors tend to be on their own unique schedules. So some of us teach Monday, Wednesday, Friday, some teach Tuesday, Thursday, some teach in the morning, some in the afternoons, a little bit of both. And so there isn't that sort of, hey, this is the time that our office takes a lunch break kind of culture. And I'm really fortunate. I have a wonderful colleague and a beautiful, beautiful friend, Dr. Kate Polcheski, who is a wonderful, wonderful cook. And I believe that feeding other people is her love language. And she has created a lunch culture around our department that I think has been one of the most amazing and lovely contributions that she has made. She's wicked brilliant, y'all, and has made some amazing contributions to her field. She was my teacher when I was a student and then is somebody that I co-author with now. And so for me to say that I think that this is one of the biggest contributions that she's made might sound like ridiculous, but I want to explain why. The first thing that's really important to know is that there is a science to midday recovery. When we take breaks midday, it is a cognitive reset. Studies show that mental fatigue builds in cycles, breaks restore attention and working memory. The other thing is movement in nature. So I know, for example, that if I have my booty in my seat for too long and I'm looking at screens for too long, that just getting up and incorporating some movement will be really, really, really helpful. And then the final thing is having a midday reset, a break, a lunch break, it helps us with mind wandering. So we might think about our brains and our minds wandering as being a distraction. But actually, if we don't have some intentional breaks in our cognitive structures, but what research actually shows is that when we have intentional disengagement, it actually sparks creative problem solving and helps us think outside of the box. So my friend and colleague, Kate, she is someone who plans once a week where we have a lunch together. And she brings in all sorts of food, could probably feed us all on our own, but other people are invited to bring something as well to contribute if they would like. And we just break bread together, we eat together, we share. It's also a really important time that we are actually working together to solve and talk through some different problems that we might have in the classroom, or how do I approach administration about this issue that keeps coming up. It has been such an important way for us to connect with each other, but it also gives me all of those things that I just mentioned. It gives me that sort of cognitive break that I need. It also helps me. Usually my brain wanders. Sometimes we talk about TV shows, we're doing all these other things, and it gives me a break from what I was thinking on. And it just forces me to get out of my desk, walk down the hallway, and get around other people. And then we do the dishes together and other forms of movement that I get to engage in. Because there are some hidden costs to poor lunch break culture. So just as I think my colleague Kate has made wonderful lunch break culture, there's some cost to not having that. So one, desk lunches reduce mental detachment and increase our burnout risk. When we have always on environments, that can signal mistrust and lower our psychological safety in our workplaces. Also, it can perpetuate social isolation, which can lead to weaker team cohesion and fewer cross-pollination of ideas. Creativity dips when the brain is never allowed to switch modes. So while we don't want our brain switching modes constantly, we also don't want it to be so locked in that we are draining ourselves of the creative possibilities. So how do we make a break a ritual and not just a pause? First, if you just start with pauses, that's awesome. But a ritual is a really repeated, meaningful action that signals a shift in our state. And seeing eating as a ritual, as opposed to just eating and shoveling in food, can really shift how we experience that lunch break, as well as accelerate the importance of taking that break. So for example, you might have a gratitude bite where your first bites that you eat, you do an appreciation. Y'all, I am somebody who for a very long time was really wonderful at practicing gratitude in my personal life. But I struggled practicing gratitude in my work life, in part because I was burnout. I think I was demoralized as well. I was in a state where there were definitely aspects of my job that I loved and I was so grateful for, but I wasn't necessarily practicing gratitude within my workday. And it was so helpful for me when I intentionally put some of that into the practices that I have throughout my workday. And I love the idea of having a gratitude bite where you think, well, what am I grateful for? I'm really grateful for benefits and retirement. I'm really grateful for the way that my colleague poked their head in this morning and just said, I hope you had a good weekend. I'm really grateful for the opportunity to create curriculum at the level that I get to. So incorporate a gratitude bite. This is something that you can do silently with yourself. If you're eating with others, you might even encourage each other to have some gratitude bites together. Another thing that I've really loved is I have had some lunch dates with colleagues where we have a no work talk rule, where we're going to get together and we're just going to be together, but we're not going to talk work at all. Another thing that is really fun, this isn't something that I do, but one of my previous colleagues, they would always blare music during their lunch break. The music would mark the start of their ritual, and then they would turn off their music when they were done with lunch and get back to work. And I thought that that was just a really lovely way to make lunch feel extra spunky and for it to really create that energy that you're seeking. All right, so let's imagine that you are not in a workplace culture where this is what's happening. One, I would say model. I think that leaders really need to model the behaviors that they want to see by other people. Even if you're not in a leadership position, I'm always like, lead where you are. One of the best ways to shift culture is for you to intentionally do things that create the culture that you want to be in. And so if you want people to honor work day lunch breaks, I want you to model that by doing it. You might create optional group rituals where you have Wednesday lunches outside, or a monthly creative lunch swap, or the practice that people know that you're going to ask individuals to have one-on-one lunch dates with you, where you enact the no talk about work rule. Use physical cues, right? So create a space for lunch that's away from your desk. Encourage choice. So recharge happens differently for introverts versus extroverts. So for me, I tend to be pretty introverted. And so sometimes I actually need to be pulled out of that. Other times though, if I've been in lots of meetings, I've been in front of people a lot, I love that. But it also can drain me. So I might need that individual lunchtime where I get to shut out the voices of other people. So whether you work from home or whether you work in the office, I do encourage you to do a little bit of a lunch break audit. What have you been doing? When do you take your lunch? Where do you take your lunch? With whom do you take your lunch? I want you to consider adding a micro ritual to your lunch break. Maybe that is gratitude with a bite. Maybe it is just taking a pause and taking some deep breaths and thinking about how you want to show up the rest of the afternoon. If you lead a team, I really want you to think about having a no meeting lunch hour policy so that you know that you're never scheduling meetings over that lunch break so that people can actually take them. Y'all, I want you to rethink the lunch break. If you've thought about lunch break as wasted time, if you've thought about it as, oh, if I take this break, people aren't going to think that I am as committed to my job, I want you to reframe it as a strategic investment in your afternoon. That by taking a break, by having a midday reset, your afternoon performance and creativity is going to soar. So I want you to try one lunchtime ritual and give it a shot. Also, I'm really excited. I'll talk about this a little bit more in some upcoming episodes, but I want you to take my stuck states of self-leadership. If you have felt yourself describing yourself as stuck, if you've described yourself as burnout, if you're just freaking annoyed because you keep setting goals but you're not following through, I want you to take my stuck states of self-leadership assessment as a way to identify what exactly is keeping you stuck, how that's impacting your planning and goal setting. And then I'm going to offer you a little micro ritual that is specifically tailored to your stuck state so that you can start wiggling and jiggling out of it. Y'all, I wish for you afternoons that are full of energy and focus and meaning. I hope that this episode has got you rethinking your lunch breaks. And until next time, be bold, be balanced, and be well, friends.